Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Sandy Friedman. I'm a master instructor with ASCM and an advisory board member of the ASCM Eco-Sustainability Special Interest Group. I've held management positions in various industries and consulting firms, mainly in aerospace, biotech, high-tech, and municipal governments. I'm privileged to introduce Fernanda DeBellion as today's distinguished speaker. Fernanda DeBellion is the Regional Director for Central and South America and Solutions Architect for Sustainability at ASCM. She has over 20 years of experience in manufacturing, inventory management, logistics, operations, and distribution network design for multinational companies such as SC Johnson, Shell Lubricants, and non-government organizations in the public health space and low and middle income countries. As an APICS instructor, she has been involved in multiple capacities, building initiatives in different countries with ASCM. Fernanda holds a bachelor's degree in chemical engineering from Pontifical Catholic University of Rio de Janeiro and a master's degree in management of logistics and production systems from École des Mines de Nantes in France. She has also earned the CSEP, CLTD, and SCORE-P ASCM certifications. Please say hello to Fernanda.
Hello, everyone. Thanks, Sandy, for the introduction, and thanks for the San Diego chapter for having me here speaking in such an important topic today. So it is a pleasure to be here to introduce you to this new offer, Building Sustainable Supply Chain Best Practice and Solution. And we all discuss how long a way this has come over the years. By the way, I forgot to say hello. I'm based in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. And you can imagine how excited I am about this subject, specifically where I'm sitting from, seeing the things that is happening in my own country. And I like to have a positive view of our roles in supply chain as a force for good, as much as unintentionally, as Preston and I was discussing. We may have done some harm in the past, maybe operating not so much with the sustainable aspect of view, but I do believe that us as supply chain professionals, we have the power to transform and design sustainable supply chains and operations. So with that in mind, we have created this new educational offer from ASCM. Very excited. We just released it about 2 weeks ago, and we are rolling this out globally on the next few weeks as well with a second consortium of instructors. And the main objectives for this class, three things. First, we want to have supply chain professionals understand key sustainability concepts and how they relate to supply chains. Today, we feel that some of those concepts are still very far from our daily jobs, but we can bring them to our context as professionals. The second thing we'll address on this course is how to interpret our sustainability standards. I don't even know if all of you know about, but ASCM has a supply chain sustainability standard, and I'll talk about this on the following slides, but on the class, we will use it, how to embed, as a way of learning how to embed those practices in the supply chain.
You want me to use the...
I'm actually probably...
okay, yeah.
And in the third part of the class, we'll be using, and it's very interactive, so we use the concepts that we learn to embed those concepts and the standards itself into the supply chain. So the class overall, it's very interactive, and there's plenty of exercises and discussions, and we learn a lot from each other and from our own experiences as well, knowing that this is a topic that ever evolves, especially when we talk about countries and regions. So Europe has, different perspectives and legislation than the US. So one of the other things that we see from this class is as we interact, we learn from each other as well on their local geographies, what is happening in their own worlds. I wanted to give you guys an overview of what part one is, and I'm not going to go into details. I'll share with you the agenda, what I have prepared for you today, but I wanted for you to have an overview of what are the types of subjects that we're discussing on this class. So we'll be defining sustainability, understanding what ESG is and why that relates to supply chains. We'll talk about circular economies. We have a brief overview of the SCORE model, very quick, but this is important because the way the standards were structured, they were structured in reference to the SCORE model with the microprocesses of plant source, make, deliver, and return. So we bring this, we give a little freshen up on this one. We talk about the UN Global Compact and the Sustainable Development Goals, how they relate to supply chains and what we have to do with it. And then we talk about trends. This is where, you know, we can see that instructors can really bring a value to bring into their context what is happening in the US, what's happening in Brazil, what's happening in Europe. So we've seen that different initiatives and regulations and requirements from different countries. We'll be talking about how to use GRI, what they are, other certifications. We'll talk about ISO and about the emissions management and reporting, which is a big thing for us. Scopes 1, 2, and 3. So this is in a nutshell what we see in the first big chunk of the class. But for this specific session, I went ahead and selected a few topics for us to have a little snippets of the class for you guys to have a flavor of what it is. And then at the end, I'll show a little bit more details about the specification. So what I prepared for you guys today is I'll be giving a quick overview of the key foundational topics that are on the building sustainable supply chain class, but I wanted to bring to this specific webinar. I'll give you guys a standards overview if you're not familiar with that. We do a lot of exercises in a deeper dive in the class, but I wanted to have a look at what the standards are and how we can leverage those standards for process improvement in reporting. At the end, I'll show you guys a little bit of the course specification, then we can open for Q&A. Okay, so let's get started. So one of the first key concepts that I always like to bring is the concept of what is sustainability. Because sometimes sustainability is only related to green, to the planet, to whatever is green business, is green, you know, everything related just to the environment. And actually sustainability, it is the intersection of three things that need to operate in balance. It's also called the three P's: people, profit, and planet. So sustainability is really the intersection of how do you operate optimally, giving profits with economic performance while respecting the people and the planet. So you have to have the three for something to be considered sustainable. You can't just operate 100% in profit if if you're violating human rights, not respecting the people and harming the planet. You can't just operate on the planet and not deliver any profit because you won't thrive. And you can't be just a philanthropy 100% because you won't thrive as well without delivering some value and profit. So these three they always need to work together in everything. And it's this new set of eyes, and this was developed 1994, not too long ago, or maybe too long ago, by John Elkington. He also coined the triple bottom line term that we'll see on the other slides. But this new set of eyes, so how do we do things sustainably? How do we operate and manage supply chains that they can be efficient, they can generate value and profit, but respect the planet and respect the people? So this is what we're trying to bring to the table when we talk about sustainability and supply chain. So it has always these three aspects. And back to the concept of a sustainable supply chain, the way we define it, and we'll go through this graph in more detail on the upcoming slides when we talk about the standards. A sustainable supply chain is one that fully integrates ethical and environmental responsible practices while still delivering process excellence for performance, for economic performance on the operations. So it has to be the three for us to consider a sustainable supply chain. And we'll go over this in detail on the upcoming slides. So when we talk about the forces, the wide sustainability, what is happening, I wanted to bring you guys a survey from Gartner from 2020, and who is pushing for this to happen, who is moving the needle there. So the majority, according to them, so there's a high pressure from customers as stakeholders, 60%, also investors, almost half, of the pressures coming from investors as well. Regulation, almost there, and this tends to increase as we look in things that are happening, especially in the US and in Europe, and also employees. So these are the key stakeholders that are, putting pressure on investing in sustainability, in being proud that you work in a sustainable company, in a company that won't, damage the environment and the people. Regulators, they feel that, no one is doing voluntarily, regulation will need to come. Investors, they want to make sure that they're putting money on something that is less risky, that won't cause any harm, and then tie it back to them as being investors of a company that has bad reputation and has low resilience as well. And customers, that they want to be sure that they're doing the right choice when they're purchasing their products. They're not, purchasing something that at the end of the chain, they are hiring a child, to harvest the cotton that you're wearing in the shirt or something like this. So these are the key forces that we are seeing as stakeholders that are driving the sustainability. And of course, this is something that we bring up for discussion when we talk about advocacy, why it matters to us, why it matters for business. As I mentioned on the previous slide with the stakeholder engagements, they want to operate, they want to have companies that has a social license to operate, that, that they feel that they are putting money in something that is recognizable, that won't be damaged in the future. Of course, it brings business benefits for the business, like operational cost reduction. If you think about, you'll be having lower energy cost, or you'll be looking into waste or reducing waste, so things that will provide a material benefit in terms of profit and savings, and resilience as well. We know that, and this is something that other initiatives are trying to prove, that shorter supply chains, smaller supply chains, localized supply chain, they're more resilient. The longer you are, the more exposed to other risks you are, especially with climate change. You're exposed to other things that may impact your supply chain. They will be less resilient, in other words, more fragile to those impacts. So having a sustainable, a shorter, more concise supply chain will also make your business more resilient. So this is for business and society, of course. There's a huge push for many different sectors to limit the temperature about 1.5 degrees Celsius. This is a global consensus that came out from the Paris Agreement. When you guys hear, oh, let's keep it below 1.5, this is what it means, because there's this big commitment in society that not try to warm the earth or more than what it already is. So there's a cap to it. It's 1.5 degrees Celsius. Apparently we are on it a little bit above it, but there's a pressure for this as well. This is a global consensus. And of course, how do we guarantee that everyone, society will continue to have access to food and water security? We experience droughts all over the world. I know it's no different in California. Same happens here in Brazil, in places that were pretty green before. The amount of new catastrophic events, especially in underprivileged regions. I mean, when we think about countries in the Pacific that are islands that would disappear. And of course, making sure that we need to secure a planet. This is called kind of social justice, right? So how do we secure planet for other generations to thrive, given that we had ours? How do we handle these future generations? So there's all these different advocacy plays for this, for the case for sustainability. But what it matters that what we can do that is in our hands. So we know it's out there. This is the scenario. So what we do about this, we are all supply chain professionals, and we at some capacity, shape or form, we have a role to play on how to do our part on this big equation, right? So the other concept I wanted to bring, it's related to sustainability, is the triple bottom line. It's also a term that was coined by Elkington. I think it was a little bit after the sustainability one, but it talks about the ability of a company to operate sustainably, taking to these three measurements: how profitable they are, if they're environmentally friendly, and with social contributions. So a company that in theory operates under the triple bottom line, for every strategy, supply chain operations and strategy, their goals, everything, there will be these three variables. So in a dashboard, you typically see your environmental metrics, your GHG emissions, you see your waste, you see your water consumption, things like this with this set of eyes, as well as the social impacts as well. So the organization should have a truly comprehensive accounting performance in all of these different levels for it to be considered a company operating under the triple bottom line. And this is something that we want to bring forward again when we talk about sustainable supply chain. How do we bring these different metrics and processes into our operations? ESG is another important concept for us. some people even, they don't even grasp. ESG is related more to social responsible investing. It stands for environmental, social, and governance. It is actually a framework where company reports their data on environmental performance, social performance, and governance. Environmental criteria is how a company performs in relation to the natures, right? So how do they do it? It has emission reporting, has how they tackle deforestation and things like this. Social examines how a company has its relationship with employees, suppliers, their stakeholders, and communities that operate. And governance deals with leadership, boards, pays, things like this. So it is a framework that company usually reports. It is separate from the financial reporting, but it has to do with responsible investing. Because in other words, banks are willing to lend money at better rates for companies that have better ESG data or ESG rates. Sometimes companies are rated as per their rates for ESG. And according to the ESG rate, banks will give them a specific rate for their credit. And the reason for this is because ESG is also related to risk. So companies with a lower ESG rate, they have a higher risk, though they pay more for money, let's put it this way. So why this matters for us supply chains? Supply chains, whether or not we know or whether or not we have a say on it or we actually work on it, most of that data, many of that data that comes from the supply chain. In the supply chain, for the good or for the bad, has a way to expose companies to those risks that may be negative, like natural resource depletion, energy use, waste, GHG emissions. If they, for example, if a company, and this is a classic case, I think that was in Australia, a mining, bought a land from the indigenous people, and they opened up, they did all these deforestation, and then years afterwards, the indigenous are calling back the land, and there's this big file against them, and the mining company is in trouble for different reasons, and imagine the investors on this company. So all of these things, these decisions were taken probably by someone in the operations that said the optimal network, the optimal location. And this is something that we will need to consider when making these decisions forward now. So, and supply chains have that, I'm not going to say power, but the way we operate, the nature of our business, we need to take those decisions. And now it's a matter, so how do we take those decisions? How do we select our network? How do we select where we're going to operate? How do we select our transportation modes? How do we know that we are working with companies that control their emissions so that I can report it back on my scope 3? So all of these new things that kind of stayed aside, these are more and more coming to our tool set or our skill set that we need to know for trying to make the change and try to make, sustainable supply chains. So supply chains, yes, they may expose negative data on ESG, so human rights abuse, corruption, and government and regulation. So this is how it relates to us. The other important concept is the circular economy and circular supply chains. So we all operate under linear economy, unless it's not by design nowadays, when we design for circularity, and this is something we discussed a lot on the first class, because it's much easier for you to have a circular supply chain when you design for it. But for now, what we see is pretty much most companies would take, make, use, dispose model. Many companies now embedding circular elements where they avoid the dispose as much as they can, either than fueling this for second supply chain. But this is a big change for them as well. And the idea is, as we move forward, is really to make a circular economy where we'll pass from a linear model to a circular where we'll make, use, collect, transform, and reuse. And we keep materials on that loop, avoiding 100% landfill. Is that, it's like my colleague Grant says, one man's trash is another man's gold. So how do we keep those materials and waste into the production cycle? How we divert things from landfill, which is the ultimate goal of a true circular supply chain. So these are the things that we need to see how we embed. It's such a high lift. So ASCM has this collaboration, this partnership with the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. I don't know if you guys are familiar. So they really advocate. They are truly for the circular economy and in all aspects for food, fashion, and now they have this vertical stream in supply chain. And we are part of it. So this is our challenge now. How do we embed that knowledge in supply chain professionals to one, design for circularity, to even on the small things, how to think circular, how to think about keep materials moving, how we design our reverse logistics, how to think that our waste could be fitting into another supply chain and convert waste into value and not divert things to landfill. So this is another big part of the equation, as well as we want to transition to a low carbon economy. For those of you that are ASCM members through the chapter, there is a free, it's in the learning link, it's called the micro learning. It's within the supply chain learning link. And you get a couple of maintenance points. So it's a free, it's called micro learning, but it's a set of webinars on the circular economy. It's really nice. It's in 4 parts and it will give you some points. So it's good to, to reset your brain, to get you thinking on what are these circular elements you could be thinking about of embedding in your supply chain. So this is really cool as well. So let's talk about the Sustainable Development Goals. This is something that we discussed during the class as well. I think it's an important framework for supply chain professionals to know that exists. This is also called Agenda 2030, because there's a commitment that will reach most of those goals by 2030. I think we're late, but let's see how far we can go. And these are the goals that the UN came up after the conference in 2015. Most of the states signed it. So there's this global commitment to address the 17 key issues in the world. I'll lay them out on the next slide. And the private sector plays a key role as well. We've been seeing engagement because they report their results and their initiatives according to those 17 goals. So companies that are signatory to the United Nations Global Compact, and most of the big companies, they are signatories. They pledge to support those goals, and most of their initiatives, they are also funneled to help these goals. And when they report back to society on their sustainability reports that are also available on their websites for anyone to look up, they also report using the global goals as a framework for reporting as well. So this is becoming, so investors are looking into it as to see how aligned they are. Companies, when they do their supply chain strategy or other strategies, they look at the SDGs as well. So it is important to us as well, so as supply chain professionals, because we do contribute mostly to 2 of the goals. I'm not going to go through all of them, but there are 2 goals specifically that we have a weight on it. So the first one is goal 12, responsible consumption and production. Goal 12 talks about waste management and how to recycle things and how to deal with waste. So this is on us. And goal 13 is climate action. This is the one on emissions accounting. How do we reduce emissions? How do we report emissions? Things like this. Companies, depending on their nature of their business, may report on other goals as well. Actually, most of companies report in multiple goals. I'll give you an example. An oil and gas company, for example, that has oil rigs on their operation, they would report also on goal 14, life below water. So they have activities on how to preserve the ocean's life below water. So this is the importance of the Sustainable Development Goals. So let me go a little bit deeper on our standards for sustainability. And I don't know how many of you are familiar with those. Upfront, those standards, they are free, available to download. I'll have a QR code at the end for you guys to have it at easy. But the intention of the standards was really to give you some guidelines on how to operationalize sustainability in the supply chain. So it is a roadmap. You can use it for self-assessment. You can use it for references, practices. You can use it to give you ideas. It is a booklet of 96 pages. It has 189 standards. Can be used for any industry. It's industry agnostic, open access. And you can use it to evaluate your supply chain if it's in alignment with the 3 pillars of ethical, economical, and ecological. And companies use standards for different, for different strategies in different ways. One could be to validate or to update your supply chain strategy, do like an as-is map. How am I doing? Identify the gaps for improvement. Say, oh, I'm like this, but the standard says it should be like this. And you can think about projects or how to get ideas of improving your processes. It is also could be used for supplier evaluation and selection, and also to support ESG reporting. And I'll have more on that on the upcoming slides. This is a little bit of the DNA of the standard. So it comes from different sources. So we had, of course, ISO, the Global Compact, GRI, the Dow Jones, some of it that, that we extracted, nothing new. But I think that the really differentiation from our standards is the body of knowledge of ASCM, that it has all of these concepts that are from the other standards, because we have many standards out there. We just have a little sample of them here. But our body of knowledge is unique. So when you embed those standards, that standpoint to the supply chain processes, this is what is different about the other standards that are there. So this is really the first standard that is supply chain specific and has a zoom into the bottom, to the triple bottom line. So this is what's different about us. And I have this question all the time. There's so many standards out there. Why is ours different? It's because it is supply chain specific and leverages the ASCM body of knowledge. The standards also, they're mapped. This is something that helps a lot. Not only they bring our body of knowledge, and you see this when I show the process excellence part of the standards that are really the supply chain meat of it, but they're also mapped to the SDGs and to GRI. I haven't mentioned this on this class, but I know San Diego chapter has many webinars on GRI. We talk about GRI on the class, but GRI is another reporting framework. And the standards that are mapped to both the SDGs and to GRI. So companies that are already reporting on those two frameworks, they can benefit from the standard because they would see, how to map their processes to the standard, and they can go back and report on it. So this is what is unique about it as well. And so the standards, there are 189 standards, but there's 69 what we call themes. But it's actually themes, and they have definition, evidence, metrics, some questions. They were developed 2018. It's been there for a while now. We are seeing, now it's been exponential, the downloads and the usage of the standards. We had 10 corporations engaged on the development. And many companies using and leveraging this now more and more as we see sustainability shining again. So let me go. So now the following slides, I'll be going over the standards to give you guys an overview of what it is. So we call these, it's not a technical name, but we call it internally the egg timer graph. And there are all these different layers. So when you think about sustainable supply chain, we think how they should operate. And this is the lighter green and relates to the SCORE model. How do they plan, source, make, deliver, return? In light of the 3 dimensions, which is the darker green, in light of being ethical, economic, delivering profit, and ecological, respecting the planet. And for doing this, they need to have some key enablers. Then we go to the lighter gray. They need to have a strategy in place aligned with all of these 3 pillars. They have to have governance, workforce, and technology and knowledge management. And you can't do this on your own, alone. There are stakeholders out there. So this is the darker gray outer ring. Taking into account community, customer, government, and suppliers as key stakeholders. We know there's some missing from the standard itself. We had that discussion in class. We could add employee, we could add shareholder, and this is probably will be added as we evolve with the standards. But for now, these are the 4 key stakeholders that take place on this big network of processes that have these all encompassed. So these are the 9 things. We talk about process excellence, where we have really the biggest chunk of the supply chain, ethical, ecological, and economic excellence, with the zoom into the supply chain, then taking consideration as its enabler strategy, governance, workforce, and technology, and then having stakeholder engagement of these 4 key stakeholders: government, suppliers, community, and government. So let's zoom in a little bit, and I know this will be your guys' favorite because this is really the supply chain part of it. So when we talk about process excellence criteria, these are all of the criteria that we look when talking about supply chain. So there's the planning aspect of it. So facility master planning, lean planning, supply network planning, how to do these in a sustainable way in light of the triple bottom line. Then you have the sourcing part, supplier search, responsible sourcing, sustainable sourcing, total cost to serve. There's the make part of it, make or now transform with the new score. Forecast is assembly, manufacturing, quality improvement, waste management and disposal. You have the delivery part, process, invoice, quote, receive, electronic returns, perfect put away. Some of these, when you talk about, what may be sustainable, perfect put away, there's always something, like it would be like the lack of paper or the amount of trips that you do in the warehouse with the forklift powered by gas. So there's always some little things that you can do, but of course, I would say that the chunk of the things that we could be doing and seeing, they would lie here on supplier sourcing, on network planning, on mode optimization. And here is also in delivery and continuous improvement would be on the enabler. So this is really the big meat on the supply chain processes for the standards, and they map to SDG 12 and 13. When we talk about ethical excellence, then these are more the generic ones, right? And this is sometimes at the company level as well. And what we see companies doing more and more is extrapolating this for the supplier level. So it will not be just for the company-wide as policy, but as suppliers as well. So we're talking about anti-corruption and antitrust, whether or not they have codes of conduct, confidentiality of information of clients, suppliers, if they have IPs, if they have any NDAs in place when they're doing business. Human rights and labor practices, this is huge now. There are standards for this. European Union has this new due diligence that all supply chains need to have the human rights due diligence, plus a sustainability report that is validated by a third party that zooms into human rights. So this is something big that we, especially in the procurement side, the way we source things, from where we are sourcing things, have a big impact. In responsible marketing and trading partner engagement. When we talk about ecological excellence, we'll be looking into, the big things on emissions management, and they kind of follow a hierarchy. So measuring energy, water, and waste, how we use materials and the restrictions, talking about hazardous products. If you have a climate strategy in place, if you have climate strategy even embedded in your S&OP process for you to know how to forecast things or not to forecast things. Product life cycle stewardship. We did a big exercise with the group. There's a part of an exercise in the class where we do a qualitative life cycle assessment of a product, and in the circular economy. When we talk about economic excellence criteria, this is all at a high level. One of the key things, and we do have an exercise on this, is on materiality, is on identify what is material for a company and how these material topics, how they are cascaded to your supply chain strategy. So how to involve your stakeholders in coming to a consensus that what is important and what type of impact that important topic produces. We also talk about supply chain strategy and differentiated operating models. We bring examples of different supply chains, like the cocoa supply chain, where we were discussing, what type of supply chain strategy should a cocoa supply chain have, knowing that, God knows where, if your cocoa beans producers, if they have child labor involved, how are you shipping these beans from Africa, probably to Europe and other places. So all these things are discussed at the supply chain level. Customer, let me see if I skipped on anything. Yeah, no. So then there are the enablers, strategy on research and innovation in sustainability, how you design your supply chain strategy and execution, your values and governance. We talk about leadership, process governance. Is really having that governing body that looks into into the company as a whole and has that set of eyes specifically on sustainability. We saw some examples of how the companies have those ESG committees and how they do the specific due diligence on different parts of the supply chain. In workforce, we talk about, diversity and inclusion, empowerment, what are the skills and competencies that, that needs to be mapped and be in place to allow employees and workforce to do the change that we need, health and safety, and also in technology and knowledge management. How do we keep that knowledge inside our company? How do we manage? How to make sure that key information is circulated to the people that need it? So these are the things, and these are related to these specific SDGs. So this is the standard in a nutshell. The last criteria is stakeholder engagement, where we have these 4 different stakeholders: customer engagement, supply engagement, government, and community engagement. How do we take decisions taking this into consideration, especially into the supply chain as well? The third part of the class is really where we have the biggest part of the biggest exercise. It's really exciting. It's where we will use the standards for doing an assessment. It's like a mini assessment of a fictional supply chain. And I just wanted to give you guys a little bit an excerpt on this, just to give you an idea. As I mentioned before, the way we strategize, we design, and we manage our supply chains, they generate data for the ESG reporting. So how we source, from where we are sourcing, how we design the network, where are my facilities, how these things move from each transportation mode, how do I manufacture, what is my manufacturing strategy, if I outsource, if I do in-house, if I outsource, where's this outsource from, what are my risks? So everything has a supply chain finger on it. And although, as I mentioned, it's not mandatory, ESG reporting is not mandatory, it's an excellent practice that most companies already do, especially the Fortune 500. Supply chain professionals, they do provide the data for it. And there's a trend that at some point these reports will be mandatory, but for now it's not. So when you were doing these reports, and this was the other thing that I wanted to bring you guys to, is the SCORE model. So the new SCORE model, SCORE DS, brought together the triple bottom line represented on their metrics and attributes. So if you're familiar with the old version, the SCORE version 13, which is the last version, the linear version, plan, source, make, deliver, return, they had the attributes of reliability, responsiveness, agility, cost, profit in you, but they had assets as well. So what we did on this one, we added a whole new set of sustainability attributes that are related to people and to the planet. So we have the environmental metrics, and these are all mapped to GRI, so materials used, energy consumed, water, GHG, and waste generated. These metrics are the exact same as the GRI, and that's for a reason to help you guys that already work with GRI. If your company is working with GRI and you operate with the SCORE model, it will be easy for you to draw the calculation and maybe help out whoever is reporting in your company on that data. Be part of the group that is working on it. And also on social, we have diversity and inclusion, wage levels, and training that relates to people. We also have many best practice processes under the best practice that they're related to processes in this new SCORE model. So for everything, you will see a flavor of sustainability. I don't have a slide for it, but there are 2 new Orchestrate slides that talk about it. One is OE10, which is ESG. It has a process, well-laid process for ESG in supply chain, how you develop your ESG in the supply chain. And there's OE13, which is a circular supply chain management. It is a process just for embedding circularity in the supply chain, may give you guys some ideas. And actually OE13, circular supply chain management, is the process that the Ellen MacArthur Foundation using as reference when they talk about circularity and helping companies, start embedding circularity and have some idea what circularity is. They refer back to the SCORE model, to OE13. So it's a good way to get started. And here is the mapping. This is also very useful as we talk about reporting and frameworks. So as I mentioned before, the 9 things, they are mapped, all of the SDGs. You saw there's this little, the SDG icon in each of one of those. There is a correspondence to a GRI as well, to a GRI standard as well. So the reason this is useful is that so if you guys work in a company that is already reporting either in GRI or with the SDGs, you can look into what are the key SDGs, what is the strategy, and try to see what are the processes you could be collaborating on. What are new things you could be embedding in your supply chain to collaborate with your company with the SDGs. We know that now reporting and ESG sits here, and supply chain professionals and execution sits here. And what we see as an association that we need to bring those together. We need to bring ESG reporting, sustainability closer to the supply chain organizations. Many companies are already seeing this gap. And one of the reasons for this class is really to equip supply chain professionals to help bridge this gap and be closer to the sustainability organization and see what are the activities, what are the processes, new initiatives and innovations you can bring to be aligned with the sustainability strategy of the company at a higher level. And this is a big task. So this is the SDG mapping of the standards. As I was mentioning, it is supposed to help. It is an add-on tool. It's not to avoid, it's not just have the standards, it is to help out. So if you align a process, if you have some of this alignment with the sustainability standards for ASCM, you can gather some of the data from the SCORE digital standard, so you'll be in a better shape, in a better place to support your sustainability reporting. We don't want anyone to be a specialist in reporting. This is not the objective, or to start, making reports. But how can we collaborate? How can we have a seat at the table when they're reporting? How do I see what type of data is being reported? Sometimes I've spoken to supply chain professionals. They had no idea that they had everything, that what was on the reporting was actually their data. They had no idea. So how do we approach the sustainability organization in the supply chain? This is the key objective here. And it's not about reporting, it's about reducing as well. So it doesn't matter if you have the super software, if you collect all the data, if you report, but if you don't reduce it, this is not what we want to do. We want to reduce emissions above all. And the standards are a good way for you at least have a picture of your processes. So assessments, they're widely used as diagnostic tools for assessing performance, of seeing the as-is state. You can have a picture of your, look at yourself in the mirror, see the as-is and see how you want to be compared to other supply chains. It's no different with our sustainability assessment. And we are suggesting companies and, at any level, even professionals that want to just play around with it, look at the standards, scope of supply chain that you work for, see a segment. And we'll be doing this exercise during the class with the fictitious supply chain. Then we performed a self-assessment. We look at the standard, what it says, sees how we are, and then we do a gap analysis. How far am I from the standards? What percentage of the processes are aligned to the standards? And then we would be working in groups to suggest projects, initiatives. How can we bridge those gaps to attain the desired state? So this is a simple way that, it begins with, oh, let me see how I am. You learned this in the class, but we have companies that have actually done full exercises on huge supply chains just to have that as is state. But this is another thing, but this is a way for you to learn how to do it. It's the same standard at no cost. You can have a kind of a picture of your state. This is typically what we provide when we do these assessments on these big companies, and it is one graph per one of the themes. This is just an example. This is a process excellence score of one company that we assessed. So we can see here, and here's the opposite because it relates to risk. So 1 is good, 4 is bad. So this company specifically had a great sustainable sourcing practice, great supplier diversity, but had a poor S&OP process, poor lean, total cost to serve. So these are the things. And from there, how can we move the needle from here to here? What projects, processes, practices could we do to expand this score? Same for ecological excellence. So they had a climate strategy, they had their product life cycle stewardship, they knew everything, but they had no circularity. They didn't measure energy, water, and waste. So from here, we could, derive a couple of initiatives in this company to help improve those scores. So this is an example how this is used in real life as an application. Companies that go through this big exercise, they also get a summary with their scores. So these specific companies, they had bad scores in stakeholder engagement and ecological excellence, but had great scores in workforce enabler and strategy. So the effort that they had to do on their own would be to enhance these scores, ecological and stakeholders. So this gives them just, some hints from where to go and, and prioritize their projects aligned to other frameworks as well. This is just also a snippet from what we discussed in the class, ideas of projects related to the 9 things. So for each of the things, we have a set of projects that we suggest. And this is just food for thought. We allow creativity. This is just to kick off. And we've seen great ideas coming out of when we talk about bridging gapping and putting projects in place. And to that, I'm coming to an end. I just wanted to give you extra information on that training specifically. So it is structure-led. It is 15 instructional hours. It will give you 15 maintenance points. You have a letter of completion similar to this one at the end. And again, the objective is to equip supply chain professionals with tools, knowledge, everything we need to start having that new set of eyes to operate under the triple bottom line. And I'll leave this here. So this QR code, if you're able to scan it, it'll take you right to the standards page. You can download it. This is free. Play with it. I won't say print it for us to save paper, but you can look at it as a PDF. And it has a lot of information. And I think we're open for questions now, Sandy and Preston. I'll leave this up here if anyone wants to download the standard. It's easier for you to find through the QR code.
Anyone have any questions?
Not a question, but thank you for going over the course. I'm really interested in this, and I think it'll be a great course to take.
Thanks, Chris. And this is my email address if you guys want to reach me afterwards. You're welcome, to chat. I mean, you guys have a great library. The eco-sustainability library from your chapter is amazing. Preston and Sandy did an amazing job on creating all these extra resources. So you guys are in great hands as well.
All right. I'd just like to make a comment. It's not really a question. The comment is that the exercises themselves are really great. And it gets people to really expose what they know and what they don't know. And you have teammates that help fill the gap through conversation. And even though in a short time, we buzzed through this, bear in mind, this is covered in 15 hours. And Sandy and I had the benefit and the privilege of being part of that first cohort going through, getting trained on the course. But there's lots of opportunities for discussion, even the egg. I think the egg is brilliant because you could spend an hour of discussion on every single layer of that egg just to get rolling, just to get started, to bump start yourself. But there's a lot of meat in the course. And of course, the intention here is to make you aware that it exists and soon will be launched and people can attend. And it'll be foundational because with this foundation, you then can easily build without confusion, because there's a lot of different things in play on sustainability, even just in finance alone. When it comes to the institutional investors looking at your company, deciding whether they want to invest and buy their stocks, it's the banks themselves, whether they even want to lend to you. It's all getting down to that. But understanding all that becomes easier with a good foundation, and that's what this course provides. And one thing that I missed is in our program, and I speak for this, our eco-sustainability program, we elected to not talk too much about the social aspect, but to really hone in on the frameworks, the methodologies, and the techniques to reduce carbon emissions and manage water. What has become apparent, maybe I'm a little dense, but what's become apparent is we're going to have labor shortages for the next decade. So if you don't take care of the workers and invest in them, then you will not have a very good workforce. You will not have very good economic performance. And at the end, you will wind up being a third-rated supplier to your customers. So that's covered in this course, the social side, the governance side, and that's something that we missed, but really it's very, very important as well. And I just would like to commend Fernanda and her as a partner in crime out from South Africa and putting together a really great course. But I'm curious as to what, there must be other questions out there. We've got a number of people in the audience. We have time, so ask your questions.
There's a question in the comments that says, how is it REACH or REACH standard come into the picture? How does the REACH standard come into the picture? You look at this.
No, we kept it within the GRI and the SDGs. We're trying to stick to these, and I get this question all the time, if we're bringing SASB, if we're bringing other frameworks to map, and why was not that mapped. So we are just keeping it to GRI and the SDGs, just for the scalability of usage, but not other frameworks for now.
Thank you.
I think there was a question about a recording. Yes, the recording will be made available. That was the purpose of us recording all the sessions. Any other questions? In fact, just to give you, I appreciate Fernanda's approach to this. I put together a presentation 10 years ago and listed all the organizations and when they arrived on the horizon, arrived on the scene rather, and started to impact the way we thought about sustainability and how we would go combat it. And it was an old depiction. It had like maybe 20 entries in a circle, going clockwise. I decided to update it. I can't fit it on one page. There's so much interaction, so many organizations involved today, all those gaps, didn't even think about gaps. You were excited to find out there was something to address this, like the GHG protocol on emissions accounting. But I'm almost at a loss as to how to rationally put it all together. So you got to start in layers, and this is the first layer, first structured layer, and people will you'll be recognized for it if you elect to take the course. And one other thing I like was the corporate assessment where they could do it self-assessment. No one's asking that they go out and hire necessarily a firm to do that. ASCM has arranged for some firms to do that, but many folks would want to do a self-assessment first, and from there they could gauge how much help they need in pulling it all together. And I think in our conversations during the class, Fernanda mentioned that one firm that did theirs and said, no, we need help. And they got help, and then once they got that, they had a great roadmap of things to do to become sustainable.
Yeah. And what I liked about it as well, Preston, is that, we often see ourselves as professionals so far from these things. You mentioned the GHG protocol, CDP, all of these acronyms, and we are so trained to, MRP, let's do our bill of materials, all of the things, the traditional supply chain things. But there are all these other bigger things happening in our outer ring that are enablers for our future work that we need to bring it to our context. How do we leverage this? How am I impact of knowing that there is something called the GHG protocol, the greenhouse gas protocol, and that my company will be reporting reports on this, and the way I am selecting my transportation mode will impact on the emission quantity that I submit to the GHG protocol or to CDP, and I may get an A or a B for it. I mean, it's such a long trail, right? A decision of trail. So, maybe your rating on CDP will be impacted whether or not you chose a different mode for a specific supply chain or line of products. And at the end of the day, you have no idea you had some interference on this. So we are trying to bring those concepts and enablers, it will become enablers for our job performance, to our context as supply chain professionals, and bring them to something that is real and material to us, not just acronyms and things that other people are doing and talking about, but things that we have an impact on.
Are there any more questions? Well, I just want to do two things. One, I want to thank Fernanda for giving us the presentation. Again, Sandy and I are a bit spoiled because we spent 15 hours with her and Grant and a number of other people. In fact, all our classmates, we were the only, no, there were three from the US, and then all the others were from every far, we're all over the planet. DS version of SCORE is far more comprehensive, and it's easier to get your arms around than the prior one. It fills all the gaps. And of course, SCORE has been evolving since 1995. But I'd like to just show some of the events we've got coming up. Right now, we have a number one on the left-hand side is the course that or presentation you just enjoyed. On May 3rd, there's a field guide to sustainable reporting frameworks. And this takes all the frameworks that have been accepted, and it shows how they plug and play with each other. All right, and then on the 6th, we have Lean is Green, the triple bottom line, and that is the presenter there is a fellow called Jerry Wright, who's probably one of the most appreciated thought leaders on lean in the US and internationally. And he has had lots of experience bringing lean techniques into organizations and improving their sustainability performance. And it was mentioned in the discussions about the library that we have, and Sandy's the one that is maintaining that library, and you may want to take advantage of it. It's under the curated section. And we've done is we've created little buckets and pictures so you understand what's going on. But for example, if you want to learn more about GHG, climate change, and climate warming, just as a topic, you can go here, click on it. And as you can see, there's a number of choices that have all been vetted as being worth investing. So this is a supplement to the things you may learn through the new course. If you want to bone up and advance on it, or if you want to get another depth, another presentation to help you appreciate it, because sometimes the way it's presented from a different person makes a big difference. This is a place to go. Anyway, we really appreciate, again, Fernanda giving an excellent presentation. Have a great week.
Thank you all. It was a pleasure. Thanks for the invitation, Preston.
Thank you.
Bye,
Bye,
guys.
everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.